Welcome to the Schuby Show, where sports, movies, TV shows, technology, history, and more come to life. Now, please be seated and get ready for some more never-ending nonsense with yours truly, Schuby.
This is the Schuby Show with yours truly, Carson Schubert. And today on the show, we're going to be talking about baseball. The World Series just coming to a close, and the Minnesota Twins season obviously has been done for a little while already, but we've got Rhett Bollinger, who's back for the third time on the show. We really appreciate his contributions to the show, and Rhett, great to have you on again.
Thanks for having me on again. Definitely excited to be on for a third time.
Absolutely, and we can follow you on Twitter at Rhett Bollinger. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And also joining the show for the second time is Nathan Hoogland. And Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Nathan, where can we find you on Twitter at?
At Hoagie Buns.
And that's spelled Hoogie, right?
G-I-E. Yep. And I don't remember if it's Hoagie Buns 1 or just Hoagie Buns.
I think it might be 1. I think you might be right on that. So that is where, and I'm on Twitter at Carson Schuby, no longer Radio Ruben. That came to an end. Just felt like it went better with the branding to go with Carson Schuby on Twitter. So guys, the World Series, a pretty entertaining World Series. I guess my first thought is the Houston Astros, obviously a great offensive team. The Dodgers, you probably thought coming into the World Series, probably had the edge in the pitching department all the way through. So we kind of expected it was going to be a really good matchup, and it really didn't disappoint there, did it, Rhett?
No, definitely not. It was a great World Series, absolutely. Especially games 2 and 5 were pretty incredible. Big comebacks by the Astros, especially against Kenley Jansen, who's one of the best closers in the game. A lot of home runs in the series. I think it broke the record for most home runs. And George Springer had an incredible series with the 5 home runs to tie a World Series record and set the total base record. So it is pretty amazing. Yeah, there was some good pitching in the series in some senses, but at the same time, a lot of home runs, a lot of offense, a lot of action. It was, definitely a really fun series. I was lucky enough to be out in LA and to go to the games 1, 2, 6, and 7. I grew up in the Los Angeles area. My dad is still a big Dodgers fan, and so is my cousin, a couple other friends out here and all that, and my sister as well, and my mom. So I took my dad to a couple games, my cousin to a game, and my sister to a game. So it was a lot of fun to go out and see some of these games. I'd never been to the World Series before. It really was an incredible one to go to, and just a memorable one for sure for it to go 7 games. And both teams are definitely worthy of being there, and I think we'll probably see both those teams in the future as well, just because they are such good young teams.
Yeah, World Series, your first World Series. You couldn't have picked much better of a World Series to go to than this one. And you've been taking. You said you took quite a few different people. We're open. We can make our schedules open over here too, Rhett.
Perfect. Yeah, guys out there in Minnesota, let me know.
So, Nathan, what were your overall thoughts on the game? And then I kind of want to go back to Rhett and just ask him what his experience is of being at those games. Nathan, what did you think of the overall World Series? I kind of heard many people saying, "Oh, the balls are juiced. Just see all the home runs hit during the regular season, and then the postseason, more home runs than ever before. The baseballs are juiced, right, Nathan?"
I wouldn't go ahead and say that. I would say I would probably call it the greatest World Series of my lifetime. For sure, the first one I cared about. That being said, Game 7 did kind of let me down. I mean, it wasn't a bad game, but it was missing something.
Yeah, I guess I can kind of understand that perspective where there wasn't maybe as much pitching as we were kind of hoping for, but isn't that what you kind of get with 2 really good offenses? I understand a lot of people are like, well, it's just a bunch of people hitting home runs. That's not very fun. To me, hitting a home run, that's pretty fun. That's fun to see home runs being hit. That's kind of what your goal is to be at the plate. You want to hit a home run. You want to be able to go from home to home on one hit. That's kind of your goal. But I understand where people want maybe more of the pitching and defensive side of things. And for the most part, that did really disappoint because I mean you thought Kershaw and Keuchel would probably put up at least two really good pitching performances, and it almost seemed like Rhett, going back to you here, it's almost seemed like we kind of have welcomed in a new kind of a phase of baseball where in the postseason teams are going to use all kinds of pitchers instead of try and just use one. They want to try and get the most out of their pitchers, but at the same time they also want to win games, and I feel like maybe those teams didn't think that their pitchers could win those games for them.
Yeah, exactly. I think right now kind of teams are definitely going with kind of shorter leash with some of their starters. You saw the Yankees do it a lot too with their pretty dominant bullpen, including obviously in the wild card game against the Twins, with Severino getting only one out and then going right to their bullpen and still winning that game. The Dodgers, I think obviously have to have the bullpen to be able to do that. You have to have a good bullpen to be able to pull that off. But we saw the Dodgers do that a lot, even when Rich Hill had two pretty good starts there in the World Series, and both times. He was pulled from the game by Dave Roberts. So it is kind of the way it's trending. And then also just, even just using more starters out of the bullpen in relief. We saw, Brad Peacock pitching in relief a lot. We saw, even McCullers pitching in relief in some of the early series before he started late. A lot of the kind of mixing and matching of guys in relief. Even Kershaw pitched in relief, 4 innings in Game 7. So definitely kind of all hands on deck when it gets to that point. So it's definitely interesting to kind of see the way the pitching's been used, and the home runs definitely been a big part of it. You never know. Obviously, there are complaints about the baseball itself and it being a little bit different of a material. I don't know, how true that was or not, but that was certainly kind of a storyline as well. The hard thing was, I think Nathan kind of said, the Game 7 itself was a little bit of a letdown. The games before were so much better that being at the game, once Springer that home run to go up 5-0, it was kind of like the wind was kind of let out of the sails a little bit, and the crowd kept trying to get back into it. Dodgers kept getting guys on base, but even then, it just never really felt that close. It just kind of always felt like, I don't know, in some ways, it kind of killed the crowd a little bit. So it just wasn't a very exciting game in some ways. But the rest of the series certainly was memorable, and it was a good series overall to go 7, but it wasn't quite like the most amazing series of all time or anything. I think people like to just say that because it just happened. I mean, even last year, you forget that Cubs Indians one was pretty incredible. Especially that Game 7 too was much more memorable with the rain delay and the home run off Chapman from Roger Davis and just the whole craziness of it. Where this Game 7 was pretty blah, to be honest. It was kind of 5-0 and 5-1, and it was kind of over early. So. But it's still a fun World Series. Well, yeah, we'll kind of see how, in the future, how this kind of goes. Is it going to be the way it's going to go, where we're going to see short starts from starters and more relief pitching and more power, or what can we see going forward? Just because the game definitely evolves as we go along. We'll kind of see if that's kind of the way it's going to be.
Yeah, Rhett, briefly talk a little bit about I know you kind of talked about the experience a little bit, but talk about what it's like to be there for a Game 7. Obviously, the Dodgers didn't win, but just talk about how like the crowd was. I'm sure it was almost like holding your breath on probably almost every pitch just because you don't know what's going on. Just kind of talk about that experience a little bit.
Yeah, it really was amazing. Even Game 1 is really cool in the go just because the pageantry of Game 1 is because you have more of the full flag out in the field and the lineups get introduced and just a different way in terms of all the players getting introduced going on the field, and just to feel that first Game 2 is just like, oh my gosh, it's the World Series. You can't believe it. But Game 7 definitely is just more of that, like you said, kind of that every pitch you kind of live and die with because, it means so much. Just kind of getting to the ballpark, got there early. The crowd was excited. And just I think people just kept saying people couldn't believe they were even there. And, part of it, too, is, it's been so long in L.A. They hadn't been to the World Series since '88, so it had been 29 years. So a lot of people there had never been to a World Series game before and waited a very long time for it. So just I think a lot of excitement, but like I kind of touched on earlier, the one bummer was the fact they went down so early, to be down 5-0 in the second inning. It kind of, took the crowd out of it a little bit. And like I said, they kept trying to get up for it when they had guys and runners in scoring position, especially late. And, they got behind the pitchers as much as they could. The bullpen pitched well after Darvish left, but it just wasn't quite the same. If they would have been winning the whole time, I think it would have been rocking the entire time. In Game 6 was a pretty good, crowd, especially once they took the lead, and late it was incredible. So I think that's kind of the thing. I think I noticed is that if you're at home and you're winning or you're at least in a close game, it's more palpable, whereas that Game 7 just never really quite had that feel. But it's still cool to be a part of and to be at a Game 7 in the World Series no matter what. It's just fun and just a cool experience. But I do think that it would have been a lot better if it was a closer game, because I do think the closer the game, obviously, the more kind of the crowd gets crazy into it. Whereas this one, the crowd was a little bit like hesitant just because it was so bad early.
Absolutely. I want to get your take on a couple of questions, both of you guys. First of all, Nathan, what did you think about not starting Kershaw in Game 7? Because obviously Darvish came out and he did not pitch well at all. He didn't pitch well earlier in the World Series. But then Kershaw came in relief, and he did pretty well. And I know you maybe don't get 5 innings out of him, but, I mean, at least get 3 innings out of him. That's better than what you got out of Darvish. What are your thoughts on maybe starting Kershaw Game 7 instead?
I kind of see both sides of that argument. Yes, Kershaw is easily the most dominant pitcher in the MLB right now. So he has to rest 2 or multiple innings. I get that argument that, why not start him? But at the same time, because I was on the side of not starting him. I said, why not, start, Darvish, just not Hill, but, Wood, someone else out there, put them out there, get, their 3-4 innings out of them. Unfortunately, Darvish didn't give him that. Kind of do something along those lines. Then, turn your bullpen, say Jansen gets a 6th and 7th, bring in Kershaw to close the door, bring in Kershaw to be, that 5, 6, 7, Jansen close the door, something like that. Give him that real late inning punch. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I thought that would have been a very well played bullpen. It did work out, which it didn't.
Yeah. I guess my thought is, why not just send Kershaw out there and then say, we put out our best and they hit him, so why not just live and die with Kershaw? I know he's had his struggles in the postseason. What are your thoughts on it, Rhett?
I think it would have been maybe a little bit more rest. I think with Kershaw being only 2 days rest is a lot to ask from him. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they could have started Alex Wood on short rest, on 3 days rest. And he pitched really well, in his one start, and Darvish pitched so poorly in that, in his start in Game 3. It's hard to really, it's hard for me to really blame Roberts too much, just because Darvish pitched so well in his previous starts leading up to the World Series. He pitched well down the stretch. He pitched well in his 2 previous starts in the postseason. Obviously got shelled in Game 3, but you kind of thought, okay, maybe Darvish is a pretty good pitcher. Maybe he'll bounce back at home at Dodger Stadium and all that, but he just never really had his command going at all. If anything, maybe Roberts should have pulled him after the first inning and just said, at this point, we need to just go to our bullpen, because he clearly didn't have it. But I saw an interesting article the day before that Fangraphs was saying they thought that what they should have done originally was have Darvish pitch in relief and finish Game 6 instead, and then Game 7 kind of have it as a bullpen game, whether you want to start Kershaw or start, Wood, or even start Maeda to go 2 innings. Just have it be a bullpen, have the entire bullpen be fresh and ready to go for Game 7. And have, Darvish pitch in relief in Game 6. But the problem is, at that point, I don't know if that even would have worked, because Darvish has just been so bad. I don't know if he would have been able to even get through Game 6, because Hill didn't really go too deep into that game either. So it is interesting. It's certainly a talker. I just think with Kershaw being only on 2 days rest, it's hard to have him start that game. But certainly he looked good in those 4 innings. But I would have been fine starting starting Wood on short rest. Would have made some sense. But I think sometimes hindsight's 20/20. It just is one of those things where Darvish just didn't have it in the World Series for whatever reason. Who knows if it was because the slick ball that he couldn't get a grip on is what one of the claims was, or he just didn't have it. It's probably going to hurt him a little bit in free agency, but I think he's still the number 1 starter out there in free agency anyway, so I think he'll still get paid a lot.
Yeah, that's a good debate that we might have to talk about here in a little bit. Who is the number 1 starter in free agency? The last question I have related to the World Series, Dodgers and Astros, is this a potential rematch, not only for next year, but for years to come? Both of these teams have such great young talent. I think there's a potential rematch. You kind of got like with the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think it could be a potential 3-year matchup. Nathan, what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely see the Astros winning at least next 5 years, maybe even 2. And, I mean, the Dodgers are made to win now. The question is, how long is this now going to continue before they break up?
Yeah, that's a good point. with like guys like Justin Turner. How much longer can he keep playing? But I mean, you do got some young pieces like Bellinger, who obviously struggled a lot in the World Series. But you got Seager, and you got Jock Peterson, you got Puig. So, I mean, your core lineup is there, but some of your pitchers are getting older. Rhett, do you think this could be a potential rematch for years to come, or what are your thoughts on this?
I think on paper, yes. We just know in baseball it's so hard for that to happen, you know.
Yes.
Just to even get there, you know what I mean? The Warriors and Cavs is one thing, because in the NBA, the best team usually always wins their playoff series. Yep. But in MLB, we know that doesn't always happen. And, you know, even this year, I think like the Indians might make it, and the Indians kind of lost early there in the postseason. So I do think on paper they're the best two teams going forward in both leagues, just because they do have that perfect kind of combination of young talent and enough pitching to kind of continue to be dominant out there, and a young position player core that's going to score a lot of runs for both teams. So, yeah, I think that they're both going to be dominant. It's just a matter of, it's just so hard to know, you know, are you going to get back there? You know, because the Indians are still a really good team as well. Even the Nationals have had their problems. They're still a good team. The Yankees right now in the American League are going to be really scary with, you know, how good they're going to be, considering they almost made it this year. And yet they're a young team, and they're going to probably sign a bunch of guys in free agency to make everybody angry, and probably sign Bryce Harper, whoever else, you know, after next year. So they're going to be stacked going forward too. So, and the Cubs still are a very good core as well. So there still are some really good teams out there. Like I said, in the postseason, you never really know. But I do think you're right. I think that on paper, yeah, the next couple of years here, those are the best two teams. They should be even going forward. But things happen in the playoffs. You never know. But I guess if I had to guess who's going to win the most games in the regular season the next couple of years, I'd probably go with both those teams. But getting to the World Series is a different story. But certainly they've both been there now, and they have the experience of it. But, yeah, you never know if they're ever going to get back there. But I do think that, at least on paper, they certainly have a chance.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you on that baseball is completely different from the NBA. You don't always get the best teams in the World Series. I mean, that has been a constant thing you've been able to see over the years, that you can sometimes get teams that really shouldn't be there, but they end up winning it. And that's why I felt really like the Twins could have a shot at least getting to the second round and maybe even beating Cleveland, just because they knew Cleveland. Of course, they didn't get past New York, but if they would have gotten to Cleveland, I thought they might have had a chance, just because of how they know Cleveland. Molitor knows who's the good hitters for Cleveland, and maybe the situation's better than maybe what Joe Girardi would have, even though they ended up winning. But that's kind of why I felt that the Twins had a good shot, just because anything can really happen in the postseason. That's why it's just a matter of getting there. And sometimes the balls will bounce your way, and the calls will go your way, and that kind of thing. So that moves us to the Twins talk. 85 wins, playoffs, losing the wild card game in New York. Rhett, what did you think overall of the Twins season? Obviously, in most people's opinion, they would probably say, well, it was a good season, because they overachieved. They overachieved from what we expected from a year ago. The only team to lose over 100 games and then make the playoffs the following season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to go from my phone's cutting out there, but yeah, to go from that many, losses to the postseason like that, to be that big of a surprise was huge. The young core emerging, Byron Buxton having a great second half. Sano had a great year before his injury. A young core, obviously, with Eddie Rosario. Eduardo Escobar had breakout years as well. Pitching side, obviously, River Santana and Jose Barrios are a big part of that. And even in the bullpen, Kinsler before the trade, and Belisle and Hildenberger. So there's a lot of good storylines to look at for this team. Even Joe Mauer, resurgence, coming back at first base, having a great year offensively. So yeah, there's a lot of good pieces and things that kind of can go on going forward too. It's not really, doesn't seem like as much of a fluke as 2 years ago. I thought they kind of at least finally have some pieces in place here they can kind of build on going forward and continue to be a contender. So yeah, to be that wild card team was definitely a surprise, but a good sign for the Twins. And in that first year of the new front office, and I'm curious to see kind of how aggressive they're going to be this offseason in terms of how they're going to improve this team, because it's certainly not a perfect team, and a team that certainly needs some help, especially on the pitching side. But a good core in place and a good season for sure.
Absolutely. Nathan, what were your thoughts overall on the Twins season? Kind of the same thing, or anything to add there?
Yeah, just it's really a great story, like he said. All the older guys resurging, the younger guys coming up, a nice little mix there, making a great little season.
Absolutely. Twins getting to the playoffs again, the first team ever to lose 100 or more games, and then make the playoffs the following season. That's a pretty impressive feat. And Paul Molitor definitely reaping the benefits of that, getting the extension. I believe it's a 3-year extension. Is that right, Rhett?
That is correct.
So Paul Molitor obviously has been behind the manager behind the last 2 80-plus win seasons for the Twins, which came in his first season as manager, and then this past year. But then there was that 103-loss year last year. So do we think the Twins made the right choice in hiring Paul Molitor, Rhett?
I would think so, yeah. At this point, yeah. I think it just coming back from that, obviously the 1 year in the middle was certainly terrible, and to lose 103 games the way they did, be the worst team in the majors. The pitching was really bad that year. The team was in that 0-9 rut, never got out of it. But this year to make the postseason the way they did, and even 2 years ago, the way they kind of surprised and were in it till the end, it seems like he gets a lot out of the talent that he has. The players certainly like him a lot. I think he's gotten better with his bullpen management and even his pitching management and that kind of stuff. And we'll kind of see how the new pitching coach, Garvin Alston, meshes with him, and if they can continue to get better at that aspect of the game. But yeah, I don't really love the bunts as much sometimes, but that's just a small part of it. But yeah, I think he's definitely got the clubhouse. That's a big thing. The clubhouse trusts him, and they do. He hasn't lost clubhouse whatsoever. They definitely think he's a leader. He's a smart guy. He's very stoic. He doesn't get too high or too low. I think it's kind of a key thing for a young core like that. I think just because sometimes you get a guy who can run a little hot or a little cold and kind of a little too emotional. I think sometimes the teams feed off that a little bit too much. I think with him being the way that he is, it helped them because I think this year, you had those struggles where they had the LA, the road trip they had where they were played so poorly, and they ended up having to trade away Kinsler, trade away Garcia at the deadline. He kind of helped kind of steer the ship because I don't think he ever really panicked and kind of let the guys continue to stay kind of even keel, which is kind of his personality. So yeah, I think it made a lot of sense. I was curious as the season went along what was going to happen. There's certainly some points, including during that road trip on the West Coast, that okay, is he going to last after the season? Are they going to keep him or not? Especially with the new front office wondering if they want their own new guy. But I think that the season went along, it made more and more sense, and especially once it got to September, it seemed like it was kind of obvious at that point that he's going to come back after their big August. And sure enough, the 3-year deal made sense to me, and I think it certainly is a good thing for the organization going forward.
Yeah. Who knew that the Twins would lose 3 games to the Dodgers, the second best team in the major leagues, right? I mean,
yeah, right.
It's like, exactly. Who would have thought that, right? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Nathan, talking about Paul Molitor's extension. Do you think he got a 3-year deal? I think it's a 2-year deal and an opt-out after 1. Nathan, what were your thoughts on the extension for Paul Molitor? Do you think it was the right amount, or do you think it was too big of an extension, or do you think it was wrong to give him the extension?
I mean, I'm not going to say it's a bad move because he's a good coach. I won't deny him that. But I kind of thought wait till after the playoffs, see who else is on the market, and then if you don't like anyone else, then stick with him. Like you got Dusty Baker out there. Who knows how good of a fit he would have been, but you can't really say he's a bad coach either.
Joe Girardi.
Yeah, Joe Girardi's out there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else got fired off the top of my head. No one else is really coming to mind. But yeah, I mean, you just got other quality coaches out there. I would like to not say, not go with Molitor, but kind of tell him, we want to see who else is out there before we make a decision.
Yeah. I can understand that too, and I get why the Twins decided to stick with Molitor. I guess I would have maybe done just another 1-year extension just to see, and then I would have maybe gone for a bigger extension if the Twins make the playoffs again and maybe make a little bit of noise. But moving on to Garvin Alston, the new pitching coach. He's kind of been around a little bit, Rhett. You had a chance to talk to Anthony Castrovintz on the podcast that you've been doing for MLB.com via iTunes, the Twins. You can search Twins and podcasts and find the MLB.com Twins podcast. Rhett, you had the opportunity to talk about Garvin Alston. I'm kind of ask you to do a little bit of the same thing here. Talk a little bit about Garvin, and do you think the Twins made the right move here?
Yeah, I was able to talk to Garvin Alston as well the day that he was hired in a conference call. Came off pretty impressive, smart guy, very personable, which is a good quality to have as a position coach like that, and something you can tell they kind of look for because James Rowson's kind of the exact same way as a hitting coach. It's funny that him and they're both in the same exact area in New York too. They're both from Mount Vernon, New York. They're 4 years apart, knew each other even in Little League, which is kind of crazy. But similar personalities, which is a good thing. They kind of connect with these young players. But yeah, it's hard to know if they made the right move just because, it's hard to know too much about him. He's been around. He's never been a pitching coach though before at the major league level. He's been a bullpen coach. I talked to some people with the organizations, with the D-backs and with the A's, and both of them had really good things to say about him. They're definitely a people person, a smart guy who understands analytics, which is a good thing. So he understands some of the advanced stats they're getting and the revolutions per minute and or the RPMs and all the, StatCast data they have out there and all that. You can at least help out the pitchers with that kind of data because the big thing with Derek Falvey as the chief baseball officer is that he is really big about individualized pitching reports and info to kind of get these pitchers better on an individual level instead of a kind of an overall organizational philosophy. And I think that kind of fits Austin as well. He's kind of he kind of has that same mentality. So just based on, from what I've heard from other people asking around and just from his conference call, seems like I said a really bright guy and a guy that can connect with the pitchers really well. To say it's the right move or not, who knows? There were some veterans out there. Chris Bosio got hired by Gardenhire in Detroit. Mike Maddox was out there, and he was familiar with Thad Levine from his time in Texas. There were definitely a lot of experienced guys out there. But I think they wanted someone a little bit more young and energetic and someone who can kind of help this young staff. So I think in that sense, I think what they're looking for was a guy like Austin, and they hired him before. Some of these big names even got, hired elsewhere. So I think this is a guy they wanted. But like I said, it's too early to say it was the right hire, but at least now from what they were looking for, he certainly fits that bill.
Yeah, quick question before we bring Nathan in here. Do you think that part of the problem with the Twins pitching over the years has been they were just trying to implement exactly what the Twins wanted out of a pitcher instead of actually letting the pitcher develop the way he kind of knows himself a little bit and knows what has been working? Like you've seen pitchers that do really well in the minors, and then all of a sudden when they come up to the big leagues for the Twins, they don't do as well. And I wonder if some of that in the past has been coaching. I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
That's definitely a strong possibility. I mean, there's a reason why they've made some changes throughout the organization, including letting go Eric Rasmussen, who was their pitching coordinator throughout the minor leagues. So they're going to have a hire coming up pretty soon here on a new pitching coordinator, which is an important position. And I think a lot of the scouting reports say they give pitchers or even just information on what they wanted to do as an organization. A lot of it was just generalized, and it was limiting walks, things like that. And obviously, for a while the term of pitching to contact and all that kind of stuff was a little bit more of a philosophy organizationally, whereas I think this team is a little bit more focused on the individual, knowing this information for one guy might not help this guy because all pitchers are so different. Even from their arm angles, the way the ball comes out of their hand, and the pitches they throw, the velocities. To the way they can, is the arm angle the same for every pitch? Does it move? I mean, there's so many different things, just in the way they, sequence pitches. And so I think they kind of try to use as much data as they can to give these guys individualized stuff. And I do think in the past that was maybe an issue with this team. So I'm kind of curious how they do that throughout the minor leagues going forward. But it was kind of maybe an issue, and the reason why you're right. I think a lot of guys stalled in the minor leagues or never really became that guy they were hoping. And I think that was the fear with Jose Barrios, even a little bit. I mean, obviously he's so young, but, last year, the way he struggles so much as a rookie, you're thinking, oh, wow, it's another one of these cases of a guy who dominates in the minors and they can't take that next step. But sure enough, luckily he had a great second year this past season. So a good sign. But, yeah, they got to get some of these guys like Steven Gonsalves and Fernando Romero, these other young guys to take that step and not have as much of an early struggle before they start to really contribute.
Nathan, you have any thoughts on Garvin Alston?
To be honest, I don't really know anything about him when they announced it. I did kind of do some looking into him afterwards. And, like Rhett said, he was never really a coach. So I think it's going to be a nice little experiment they're going to try.
Yeah. He's He's an interesting guy, and I think we thought a lot of the same things, like Rhett said when James Rowson was hired. Who is this guy? And he came in and really turned Byron Buxton around, and you could make the case he turned Eddie Rosario around. So if he can do that with a couple of the Twins' starting pitchers and even relievers, we're not going to complain too much, I don't think. So. Taking a look here at Miguel Sano, and Rhett, obviously he had some major question marks towards the end of the season with injuries coming up. He had the leg injury that it ended up being a stress fracture in his left shin, and that ended up keeping him pretty much out for the entire year. He did come in and have a few at-bats at the end of the regular season. And an article on twinsbaseball.com written by Rhett Bollinger says he underwent or is going to undergo surgery on November 13th. And it says it's supposed to be a 6 to 8 week recovery. Rhett, is there a specific reason why the Twins maybe waited this long to finally get this figured out, or do you think that they were just maybe pressured into it by doctors to actually get it taken care of, or do you think what are your thoughts on that whole situation?
It's definitely interesting. You know, he suffered that injury on the foul tip. He kind of wasn't sure if he's going to be back the next day or in a couple days. He won the DL. Okay, it might be 10 days. Okay, it might be a couple weeks. Kept getting pushed further and further back, and then sure enough, I thought from what I was hearing from everybody that it just wasn't going to happen at all. He was going to miss the rest of the season. So it surprised me when he kind of out of nowhere played the last 3 games of the year. But from what I've been told, that last game of the year just did not go well. And I don't know if he re-injured it or not, but he really was hurting pretty bad in the last game of the season. So he never even was able to even participate in the workout at all before the wild card game. And then obviously was off the roster there. And then after they were eliminated there a few days after that, we met with, Falvey and Levine. And Levine mentioned that it was a possibility that we could see Sano need surgery. The big thing was they wanted to avoid it if they possibly could, to either just have him rehab it all off season or even have a minor surgery. But I think they just kept waiting and hoping, and sure enough, it just got to the point where they met with the doctors a couple more times and just realized it has to be done, because it's just a surgery they don't want to have happen because the fact that it's going to be a titanium rod in his shin there. Mm-hmm. You don't really want to have a player play with a rod in their shin permanently. Right. It's not exactly a fun thing to have in there. But the good news is that it's an injury that, football players and NBA players have, not regularly, but it's certainly more common in those leagues. And those guys come back from it fine and play, and they're obviously putting more weight on their leg in a different way than baseball players are. So it shouldn't be like a long-term issue. And if it's 6 to 8 weeks, he'll still be ready to go by spring training. So it's not that big of a deal. I think I think obviously fans want to know why it didn't happen earlier and all that. But I think early on, there was just that hope that he was going to be fine to even play during the season. And that never really happened. And then kept waiting after the season for it to heal, and it just never really happened. And I think that I'm sure he probably talked to his agents and his family and the team and met with the doctors and just decided that surgery was unfortunately the best option. But like I said, at least it's a 6 to 8 week thing, and it's something that shouldn't really linger. So it should be ready to go by spring training, but never a good thing to have your starting third baseman have a permanent rod inserted into his shin, though.
Yeah, no kidding. A couple questions on Sano. Do you think this surgery or the rod maybe has an effect on him playing third base in the future, and maybe the Twins just precautionarily put him at DH just to make sure that he doesn't have to go through that again? Or do you think he plays? And then another question is, do you think Miguel Sano's weight, that's been a topic brought up by Jim Souhan. He thought that his weight was maybe contributing to like this injury, for instance, and maybe some of his other injuries he's had in the past. What are your two thoughts on those couple of items there?
Well, I don't think the injury should be, even if he has the rod, I don't think it's going to be that long-term where it would really affect him playing third base too much. But we did ask Mauder even before we knew about the surgery, just, if he could envision him playing 150 games at third base next year. And even Mauder said it just didn't seem very realistic just because he hasn't really been healthy in the majors so far. He kind of needs breaks sometimes here and there. the DH and to play some first base. But I do think they see him as their third baseman, though. I don't think they want to DH him at all as their full-time DH because he's still so young. You know, he's not even 25 yet. You don't want to make a guy that young in his mid-20s have to DH. But the thing is that the weight concern is legitimate in a sense that I don't think that it ever had anything to do with his injury. I think that was kind of the issue with the article a lot of people had with it originally was I think that it insinuated that the injury happened because of his weight, but that wasn't the case. The injury was a fluke injury. It could happen to anybody. He just happened to foul tip the ball perfectly off of his shin. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is that organizationally, internally, there are people that are worried about his weight overall, just because it did kind of get bigger as the season went on, and he does have to be a little bit slimmer than that to be able to play that many games at third base and stay healthy. He hasn't been able to do that yet because he does have obviously a big frame. They don't need him to be a skinny guy or anything. They just kind of want him to be at least at a decent level. So he pledged at the end of the season that he was going to come back and he was going to lose some weight this off season. So we'll see if he does. I mean, it's not like I don't think it's quite as big of a deal as people try to blow it up out of proportion a little bit. He can hit, even at this weight right now, but I do think health-wise it probably would help him to lose a little bit of weight. I think even Miguel Cabrera's had the same issue recently. I think he's obviously much older than Sano, but he was also smaller when he was Sano's age. And I think right now Cabrera is basically realizing that he got too big and then had a lot of back issues and everything at first base. And so he's kind of pledged to lose weight this offseason for the Tigers. So I do think that it would help him to do that, but I don't think it certainly is a reason why he hurt his shin or anything. But I do think that losing at least a little bit of weight, even if it's 10 to 15 pounds, would just help him be healthier probably going forward without losing too much of his power, because you don't want him to come in as a skinny guy or do anything stupid with his body. But at the same time, it's not like it's one thing if you're David Ortiz and you're a big guy and you're 40 years old and you're DH, but when you're 25 and actually have some athleticism, you should be able to be out there every day. And I just don't think he's been able to do that so far.
Absolutely. Nathan, what are your overall thoughts on Sano, the injury and everything else that Sano has brought to the table and just everything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of disappointing to find out that he has that injury. One question, I don't know, maybe Rhett has a better insight on this, but, there was talk when he was still coming up through the minors of possibly becoming a outfielder. Obviously, the Twins outfield is a little full right now. But, yeah, maybe that's the way he has to go, is either DH or outfield.
Well, they did actually try that last year. They actually put him in, I think it was right field.
Right field.
Yep.
He had right field open the year.
And that did not go very well.
No, it did not.
They were kind of trying that a little bit, and honestly, I thought at the time they should have put Trevor Plouffe out there instead of Sano, just because Plouffe actually had played out there before. Or in the outfield at least. I don't know if it was specifically right field or not, but I've thought about a position change for Sano too. I think the only realistic option would be first base, or it would have to be DH. I guess that's my opinion. He was at first a shortstop, Rhett, but I think those are really only his realistic options, don't you?
Yeah, pretty much first base is really the only, or DH. And I mean, I guess he could move into first base after this season, right, or after next season with Joe's contract being up. But yeah, and that's really the only place. At this point, outfield's not going to happen with the way that it didn't really work out last time. I mean, he's such a big guy too. There's never really been an outfielder as big as he is. I mean, I guess you could maybe say Adam Dunn or somebody. Yeah. He was still never as bulky or as built the way that Miguel is. So and he would be a good first baseman, I'm sure, because he's pretty athletic at third base, and that's fine if he's a first baseman. Like I said, it's fine if you have the Miguel Cabrera route or the Albert Pujols route, and you move to first base eventually. But those guys didn't do that till they were closer to the 30s. They were able to handle those positions for a little while, and Sano's got to be able to do that as well.
Absolutely. Now looking at free agent options, Nathan, do you have any specific options of what the Twins might have on the free agent market, or do you have any just ideas of where they for sure need to fix? I think bullpen is obviously a pretty big topic. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say definitely go out and try and get Kinsler back, because after his year, he was their best reliever last year, so why not try and bring him back? But then also pitching, I'd say bring in one of those aces out there. try and just get that one more starter they may or may not need. You know, you never know if Santana's going to do it again after last year. Obviously, Darvish didn't have the year or the World Series he really wanted. I think that doesn't really diminish his value 2 games.
Yeah.
Also, you know, Alex Cobb is out there. I don't want to say he's under the radar, but he's a good quality pitcher that won't cost, you know, $100 million. I mean, there's people out there that the Twins can get without breaking the bank, because I don't think they're really in the mood to break the bank this early.
Right.
With their core so young yet. I mean, there's people out there, just go get them, try and make another run at the playoffs this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, Rhett, my take on it is I'm not, after this postseason, I'm not so sure on Darvish, but he is probably one of the number 1 starters out there. Jake Arrieta is also supposed to be out there. And I think I've even heard Masahiro Tanaka has a chance of maybe declining an option, or maybe he's just going to be a straight free agent. And then I've heard the Twins have maybe a possibility of getting Alex Cobb. I haven't heard any rumors that they're for sure going to try and get him, but I think I saw somebody predicted that he would maybe end up with the Twins. But what are your thoughts on those top 3 guys? And to me, I guess I would say Cobb is pretty much like another Irvin Santana, or he's another maybe Jose Barrios eventually turns into your ace. But I think he's more of a number 2 or 3 starter, and I think the Twins really need is a top-of-the-line guy, like one of those top 3 starters. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's still more likely that if they were to sign a guy, it would be a guy like Alex Cobb than one of the top 3 guys. Like I said, you mentioned Arrieta. He's coming off of wasn't a great year, and he's kind of getting a little bit older. So I guess the question if you sign him is, you might get him for the next couple of years where he might still be solid, but he might be kind of a bad contract by the end of it. But maybe they'll only sign a 4-year deal. Maybe then it wouldn't be as risky. I do think Darvish will be a big target out there. I bet he'll probably be the number 1 free agent out there. So I just don't know if the Twins would really want to pay over $100 million for that kind of pitcher or not. I mean, he's certainly going to have a lot of teams after him. I think the Dodgers are going to be hard after him. I think the Cubs will be after him as well. So you got to figure he's going to get a lot of offers out there. Tanaka, from what I hear too, is going to opt out of that deal and become a free agent. He could always still re-sign with the Yankees, but he'll have a lot of interest as a strikeout guy. But I do think Alex Cobb is the most likely of those kind of that mid-tier free agent that could go to the Twins. Maybe Lance Lynn, a former Cardinals pitcher. But Cobb coming off the Tommy John surgery, he proved that he was healthy. The Twins have signed guys after Tommy John before without much of an issue. So as long as he's healthy, that was 2 years ago. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. But then it kind of makes him a little bit more under the radar, maybe a little cheaper in that sense. And then the bullpen's definitely going to be an issue that they got to fix. And I do think bringing back Kinsler would make a lot of sense. As Nathan said, and I think that also maybe even bringing back Bilal would make a lot of sense. I think both those guys would like to come back, and both of them would be cheap. But I also think it would be smart to go out there and get another guy, and even maybe even go after a guy like Wade Davis and get a lockdown closer they can count on. Because right now they don't really have that, obviously, internally, because they lost both Kinsler and Bilal. Maybe Hildenberg could be that guy, but I don't know if they really want to give him the closer job yet. So I think they got to find a closer in free agency for sure, and starting pitching. But I just don't know they're really going to break the bank, because I just think that I just don't know that if you're going to spend that kind of money, I just don't know if Darvish or if Arrieta or if Tanaka's the guy that you want to spend that money on. If they're really going to go after an ace, you might be better off trading for a guy like that, of a kind of a frontline starter, than to go out there and sign him. Because usually when you sign for a guy like that, they're just a little bit on the wrong side of 30, and you just don't know what you're going to get at the end of the contract.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I think they're trying to build a consistent winner, and they don't want to. They're not in that mode right now where you're like the Nationals or somewhere where you're going to sign a guy because you want to win right now. The Twins kind of want to win now, but they also want to win later more than now, because they know I think they're going to have better chances down the road than this season. So that's why I just don't think they're going to try to sign a big veteran guy who's been around like that. But I do think they're definitely going to have to improve that pitching staff and go for it, because if they don't be at least a little bit aggressive, I think it's kind of a waste, considering they came off of a playoff season. They need to really add to this team now and continue to try to win.
Yeah. No kidding. The Twins also, like you said, need bullpen help. Wade Davis, I see he's going to be a free agent. Also, a guy like Greg Holland, who had I think Tommy John surgery a year or two ago, and then this year had a pretty solid year with the Rockies. and that's a terrible ballpark to pitch in, but he still was able to pitch pretty well. Maybe a guy like that would be a little bit more in the Twins' price range. Who knows? But, yeah, I think you almost have to get a closer because, like you said, I think the guys that they have the potential to build around in that bullpen, I just think too many of them are really too young to give that big of a role to right out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, Hildenberger would be maybe the one guy you could count on for that. The good news is they do have some good young arms, and Bucinich was a surprise last year. I think Presses should bounce back. They have a lot of young guys in their system, guys that have been hurt, like JT Chagua or, Birdie and Reed. I mean, they still have some of these guys that are in their system that should be up pretty soon. Tyler J. that should help out, but I do think they need a veteran guy at the back end there.
Yeah.
The good news is it seems like there's a lot of guys out there that could be in that price range. But, yeah, they definitely need bullpen help at the back end.
Yeah, and the thing is, we've said that before where we're like, oh, yeah, we got plenty of arms down in the minors. We've got all these people in the minors, and then they never end up coming up. Like a guy like Tyler J., he was supposed to be up like probably, last year or 2 years ago already? We thought that he could be up that fast. And obviously he's had injury issues and that kind of thing, but that really hasn't worked out. So, I mean, why not try and go get more of a sure thing? Obviously, free agents are never a sure thing. Ricky Nolasco, a.k.a. But it seems like free agents can have a lot bigger of an impact, and you have more of an idea of what they've been like in the big leagues, where these prospects, even if they do come up, you don't even know if they're going to be good in the big leagues.
Yeah, exactly. We saw that with two young guys. John Curtis, had great numbers in the minors, didn't really translate right away. We've seen that with JT Chagua. Luckily, I said Hildenberger and Bucinich kind of came up and had success right away, but it's kind of rare sometimes to be able to do that as a reliever. So it's nice to have a veteran that that has pitched, late in games, and can get guys out, especially strikeout-wise. I think this team needs to get more strikeouts, especially from the bullpen. This has always been an issue for them, and they've gotten a little better at it. They've gotten more high-velocity guys. But I think whoever they're going to sign has got to be somebody who can strike some people out, because that's a big thing to get out of jams, especially in the bullpen nowadays. Strikeouts are such a big part of the game, especially getting out of jams and everything. They need to continue to get better at that. It's lucky they have a good defense, but getting a guy they can count on that they know is going to strike guys out would be something they should certainly pay for on the market or trade for.
Absolutely. One quick last thing, Rhett, is there a potential trade, and I'll ask Nathan too, a potential trade for a number one type starter that you could really get behind if you're the Twins, like a particular guy that you really like, or maybe just somebody that could really put this Twins rotation over the top potentially?
That's a really good question. I have to really think about it, see who would be a frontline guy that's available out there right now. I think a lot of guys have been traded in the last year or so. Guys like Quintana, I feel like I liked a lot, but obviously not going to go within the division, went to the Cubs.
Right.
It's just a matter of, I guess, the guys who would be out there available to get in the trade. I'd have to kind of do a little more research and figure that out. Okay. But I'll think about it as Nathan answers his, and maybe I'll be back off there. Yeah,
absolutely. Nathan, what would you say would be a good trade? I kind of mentioned last year before the trade deadline, or this past year before the trade deadline, the San Francisco Giants kind of have all these kind of starters that were just kind of out there. And I said, you know what? Put together a big trade package for Madison Bumgarner. I know it would have probably taken pretty much your whole farm system. But if he's healthy, he is probably the best pitcher, I think, in Major League Baseball. What are your thoughts on that? And then just the whole potential trading for a number one type starter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with Rhett on that. I don't know any, number ones that are just absolutely dominant that are out there for a trade right now. There's a lot of those, number 3 starters, maybe number 2 out there that you can get for a little bit. But, yeah, even Madison Bumgarner, he's one of those ones out there that could get dealt. Do you really want to give up your whole farm system for one guy who may or may not ever go back to what he was? I mean, I don't really want that to happen as a Twins fan, but ultimately it's up to Falvey and Levine, not me. Mm-hmm. So, and like we said, they kind of want to win later, but also now. So would you really go through that if you had to?
Yeah, that's a good question. What would you have to say to that, Rhett?
Yeah, and I kind of agree with. Yeah, would you really want to have to give up the farm system for that kind of a front office, or sorry, for an arm that you might not know what you're going to get, just because this is a team that still wants to be better in the future. It would definitely take a lot to get a frontline guy, and to give up. And what prospects would you give up? Probably like Nick Gordon and some of the top guys around him. It would just take a lot to make a deal like that happen. And I don't think they're going to trade Dozier. I don't even know, with 1 year left on his deal, he doesn't have as much value as he did before anyway. At this point, you're obviously not going to trade Irvin Santana because they need starting pitching too much. So I think more likely if they're going to make a trade for a starting pitcher, it would be for a guy who's like cost controlled, like a kind of a guy that might be more of a mid tier. Potentially could be better if you but a guy who's probably under his contract with a team where he'd be arbitration eligible or something, where he'd still be kind of cheap. Whereas I just don't know if there's any. I said I could definitely do more research to figure that out, but I don't think there's any like ready-made aces out there that are just teams that are looking to unload right now. The way sometimes it happens, certainly, but I just don't think right now. But in my just kind of thinking about it, I just don't know if there's anybody big ace right now that's really out there they can go out and get. And I said even if they were, it would take a lot to give up for the future. To me, it just doesn't probably. It'd make more sense to try to sign a guy like Cobb, or even if they really want to go out there and get a guy like Arrieta or somebody. It might only cost not only, but $100 million, which they can afford that, and they really can. The way that they're getting money off the books, and they're going to get more fans going forward because they should be better. So we'll see.
Do you last question here, guys? Do you think they're more poised to make a more free agent splash next year with Mauer's contract coming off the books, or do you think this year is going to be probably the big year that they try and go get their guys in free agency? Go with Rhett first.
I would think that next year. Yeah, I'll go first. I think next year is probably the year they really go after it, just because next year is that big free agent class is supposed to be huge anyway. So there's going to be a lot of guys that are free agents and a lot of money to go around. So I would think that would be the more likely scenario. And once Mauer's $23 million is off the books, that'd be a lot of money coming off for them to be able to spend some money. Because the thing is, they have some arbitration eligible guys, but they don't have that many big contracts otherwise. So I didn't think they could make some moves this year to help them, but I think that next offseason is when they're more likely to make a splash.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, maybe go get your closer this offseason and maybe another bullpen arm. Nathan, would you say that would be the best move? Maybe get a couple bullpen arms, and then really try and get a frontline starter and maybe an outfielder next year, or maybe a type of guy that's a DH, like a first baseman, DH, to kind of take Mauer's role. What would you say?
I am kind of in the boat of, if you're going to go get someone, do it this year and then build off it next year. Kind of like supplement your core this year and try and bring in that one or two big playmakers next year when you have more money. But at the same time, next year, who knows what's going to happen, Sano could blow out his ACL and Buxton could get a concussion like Morneau's, and the whole core's basically pulled apart. So I mean, it's kind of a guessing game to say. Obviously, we hope that doesn't happen, but that's always a possibility out there.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I say, go supplement your core right now, get set, and then pick up the last few pieces next year when you have the money.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the tough thing, is knowing that there's a chance that next year you might have injuries. I mean, everything might not go as well as you hope. So, I mean, you can't always be building for the future if you're the Twins. Eventually you're going to have to give in and go and get some of those pieces and try and win it all, because eventually you're going to probably say, well, we blew our chance, and that's exactly what Twins fans don't want to have end up happening here. So, all right, guys, well, I think that's going to do it. We're definitely over the time that I had set aside, but when we start talking baseball, we get some great conversation going. And as always, Rhett, I appreciate you joining the show. Tell us a little bit about what you've got planned for the offseason content-wise, and where we can check you out, your work, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely check me out on Twitter at Rhett Bollinger. I'm also at my Facebook page as well at Rhett Bollinger MLB. I'll still be busy throughout the offseason. We still generally have stories every day during the week to kind of always have fresh content out there. The big thing coming up right now is we'll have a lot of award stuff coming up with I have a funny feeling that Byron Buxton will have a good chance to win his first Gold Glove. Molitor's got a good chance here to win Manager of the Year. So there's going to be some of the award stuff. And then, I have some features coming out right now on the off-season, 3 big questions about what their front office could do. Look at kind of some of the options they have in free agency among the starting pitchers and bullpen guys. And there'll be some roster moves, I'm sure, coming maybe even today. Obviously today, I think the Twins lost Randy Rosario on waivers today. There'll be some more roster moves. So yeah, if you follow along, I'll be active on Twitter and I'll be active obviously on twinsbaseball.com and be covering the Twins throughout the off season. And there'll be some formatted stuff that's kind of planned, but a lot of news and features and rumors, everything out there. So definitely come check it out.
Absolutely. Nathan, we appreciate you joining the show as well. Where can we find you?
On Twitter at HoogieBuns, HOOGIE, and then Buns. I'm Schuby's friend that loves baseball, so I'm here.
Yeah, hit Nathan up if you got some crazy opinions you want to tell him or questions about the Twins or whatever it might be sports related. So again, guys, I appreciate you joining the show, and look forward to having you both on again sometime.
No problem. Thanks for having me on again.
You bet. And that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Schuby Show. We'll hope to be back again next week with another guest or two, or maybe just not a guest at all. It just depends on how the schedule works out. So we'll hope to have another episode again next week. Until then, have a good one, everybody.